Amidst all the hard-hitting reporting about the missing Malaysian airliner, it's unsurprising that the corporate media has completely overlooked the anniversary of the Iraq War. That's right, 11 years ago, one of America's bloodiest and costliest blunders began just like this.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Now, it's been 3 years since the U.S. officially ended its occupation of the country, but that doesn't refund the billions of dollars wasted nor bring back the million-plus people who have tragically died. In case you forgot, no weapons of mass destruction were ever found, and the only real legacy that remains is an abysmal mistake based on known falsehoods, a mistake that the corporate media itself was complicit in selling. But even though the conflict has officially ended, an ever-rising death toll continues to plague Iraq, the result of an ever-growing insurgency. So here to talk about the many lasting effects of the war as well as his experience on the battlefield, I'm joined now by Iraq War veteran Ryan Endicott. Thank you so much for coming on, Ryan.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Ryan, you were only 20 years old when you joined the Marine Corps in 2004 and went on to serve in Iraq for 7 months. What drove you to join the Marines initially?
Well, after high school in 2002, when I graduated, I was working on a freight dock, making minimum wage. I had very little access to health care, very little access to advanced education or anything like that. I was working extended hours for very little pay. And when the war in Iraq started, being someone that grew up from New Jersey, I was very connected to the 9/11 events and the events that had transpired after that. And the media played a huge role in bringing me, into the conflict because of the fact that, at that time, I wasn't privy to the media knowing for a fact 100% that the war was based on lies. And so at that point, with the patriotic fervor and the sort of environment that was being pushed forward by the media in conjunction with my lack of ability to move up economically or socially whatsoever in the American ladder, it kind of made me feel like I had a sense of duty and a sense of honor that I could go and do, and at the same time get health care, get access to education, and get access to guaranteed employment in a time in our country that was very tough for young adults.
Indeed. In a speech you gave in 2009 called Just Another Tuesday, you recount your experience as an infantryman in Iraq and that you were once punished for arresting a man instead of killing him. Can you expand on this?
Well, I was on post, and when this Iraqi came through my door in the post, I was at the government center in Ramadi, which is the capital of the Anbar province, where Fallujah is. And when this man came into my post, at that point, I had been standing my post, and somehow he had gotten through all of the other security measures and gotten to my post. And so when I, arrested him and detained him, my command told me at that point that it was my fault. I should have killed him. He was in an area that is completely restricted for civilians, no questions asked. It doesn't matter if he had a gun or if he didn't have a gun. That's out the door. The fact is I should have killed him. And, so for me, during that time period, that was really tough for me to deal with. I had to go through all of the repercussions of being treated as though what I had done was wrong, and how, I was called a girl and all sorts of pejorative terms around this situation, and so after that, what I think is really important is that this is just one instance of that. And how many soldiers across this country are coming down with orders from command, telling them to commit these crimes, telling them to kill people that don't have weapons, specifically because of where they are, specifically because of how they've impacted this sort of post. And so what it shows is that there's a whole policy around this, and around the idea that soldiers can kill or can murder someone that doesn't have a weapon, and that's totally explainable by the command.
It's a horrifying culture, Ryan. Thank you for talking about that. I know it's probably not easy. Was there a particular moment while serving that changed your mind about the war, your purpose there, and actually drove you to become an anti-war activist?
Well, that was certainly the beginning of a long period of raids and patrols and going through people's homes and seeing these sorts of things that were happening. But certainly, we lost a couple of soldiers, and when we lost them, the command told us that they had found the triggerman. We went door to door and, in a very systematic way, began terrorizing the local population. And there's really no other explanation other than terrorizing the local population. And anyone above military age, being 14, 15 years old, was immediately detained, immediately had sandbags over their head. And so after this, I started to think to myself, you know, what's going on here? I'm watching American soldiers die, I'm watching my friends die, and none of these people have anything to do with what's going on in America. And then I'm turning around and raiding people's homes, destroying their homes, destroying their families, ripping their families apart, and, you know, for what? And I started to see that the average Iraqi is not the enemy, is not my enemy, is not the enemy of the American people. You know, the average Iraqi is not the one taking our homes, not the one denying us health care, not the ones kicking us out of our jobs and denying us social services. You know, that's not the average Iraqi. And so I started to ask myself, you know, so why am I here? Who am I here for? If I'm not here defending freedom, defending democracy, what am I here fighting for? And I started to see that, you know, if you followed the money, it came down to the fact that I was deployed in support of a war that brought billions upon billions of dollars, even trillions, into the hands of weapons contractors, bankers, and oil tycoons.
Really sad and unfortunate state, Ryan. And every day, 22 veterans commit suicide in the U.S. Horrific statistic. What do you think is the main source behind this, and why is the government failing to adequately address what has now become an epidemic?
Well, I think what we can say is certainly clear is that, you know, the VA and the government does not have the veterans' rights to health care and veterans' benefits at heart. That the soldiers are not seen as the protectors of this country or the tip of the spear of literal freedom or democracy, but as soldiers to be sent and fight in wars that benefit the rich and that benefit Wall Street. And when we come home from these wars, we're expected to reintegrate into society with minimal benefits. My experience from the VA has been that many times the VA, in the same way that our entire healthcare system in this country revolves around, is not there to provide services with the budgets it's given, but to deny services, so that that budget can then go towards the pharmaceutical companies, towards the, you know, GE making weird video games for costing millions of dollars that they want soldiers to go through, and all this funding that is supposed to go towards healing veterans when they come home is really just going to the pharmaceutical companies or these companies.
Ryan, let's talk about the horrific failed state of Iraq today. According to the UN, over 700 people were killed just last month. 2014 has seen the highest civilian death toll since the height of the occupation. Do you think this violence is a direct result of the U.S. war, and how do you personally feel seeing the radical factions that you were told to fight retake cities like Fallujah and Ramadi?
Well, I think that what this certainly shows is that while the war in Iraq might be over, the war on the Iraqi people is far from over. And that the country is devastated, the infrastructure is devastated. When I got to Ramadi, it was an active city. It had a couple 100,000 people. There was a souk, a marketplace. There was different communities of various class structure. And by the time I left, it was bombed to the ground, potholed with bullet holes, burning trash in the streets, no access to utilities, no access to clean water, no access to trash or any things like that. And so by the time I left, we could see that the entire infrastructure had been destroyed. And so certainly there's going to be increased violence in that. And then when you add into the fact that U.S. being there and that the soldiers being there is just heightening secular conflict that's going on and creating even more strife between different factions within the area than that was there before, now you've got an area where kids who grew up 10 years old are now 18 10 years later. You know, kids who grew up 12, whatever, now they're in their 20s. And so these young adults are doing what they can to survive, and that's going to create a more violent environment. And on top of the fact that U.S. contractor presence in Iraq certainly is still massive.
And of course, I just wanted to jump in here really quick. We have about a minute left. But as an anti-war activist and organizer with March Forward, what's your message to young people today who are thinking of joining the military, and where can they go to find out more resources about how they can leave?
Well, March Forward DARRELL.org is certainly a great resource for soldiers to come and find about how they can resist and how they can refuse to fight if they so choose. And it is our right to do that. It's our lives and it's our right. As for the young people, I would say that joining the military is not an option right now. There's already enough going on trying to find homes, trying to get access to health care, trying to get access to education. So going and fighting a war in Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or Syria or wherever the U.S. government is going to send us to fight is second to the fight that's already being waged here at home.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Incredible. Ryan Endicott, Iraq War veteran, organizer with March Forward. Really appreciate you coming on.
To disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability
Amidst all the hard-hitting reporting about the missing Malaysian airliner, it's unsurprising that the corporate media has completely
to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Now, it's been 3 years since the U.S. officially ended its occupation of the country, but that doesn't refund the billions of dollars wasted nor bring back the million-plus people who have tragically died. In case you forgot, no weapons of mass destruction were ever found, and the only real legacy that remains is an abysmal mistake based on known falsehoods, a mistake that the corporate media itself was complicit in selling. But even though the con overlooked the anniversary of the Iraq War, that's right, 11 years ago, one of America's bloodiest and costliest blunders began just like this.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations